I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, Brunning, Bruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday, January 30th, our final show of the month of January. The NFC Championship and the AFC Championship game are in the books. There was a bunch of coordinators that were hired, and fortunately, based on the results of the NFC Championship game, our friend Dennis is on a cruise to Europe where he can leave his cares behind because, Matt, I will tell you, the text messaging back and forth between him and I was a different tone in the first half than the second half.
I can imagine. I mean, I think we were all feeling that exact same way. Obviously, he's a little bit more invested than we are. All of us who just kind of jumped on the Detroit Lions bandwagon. In fairness to you, you've been there for like the past 3 or 4 years, kind of hoping they'd turn it around.
I falsely thought Matt Patricia was going to get them.
Yeah, we were all there one of those years. Yeah, it sucks, man. I'm going to be honest. Like both teams that I wanted to see win lost this weekend, but they were great games. I mean, they were really great games. But Detroit, man, we're going to have a lot to talk about with all the Dan Campbell's going for it on fourth downs and everything.
Yeah, man. At halftime, I had thrown some fries into the oven because my wife and I have gotten into this Sunday. She's like, "Yeah, you can watch the game. Let's have loaded fries." So I make some fries, put some loaded toppings. By the time I had finished compiling the fries for us and got back to my seat, I'm like, "It is a tied game." How, I could hear it, and in my heart I could feel it, but it was definitely something. Well, we'll get to the games in a moment. But first, we actually have a fair bit of coaching hot stove, a lot of coordinator movement, and we will jump right in with the Eagles, a team that probably wished they had been playing this last weekend. They hired Vic Fangio to take over the defense. They have brought in now Kellen Moore to do the offense. Made sense. Moore probably wasn't going to stay with Jim Harbaugh there in the Chargers. Kellen Moore now on his third team in 3 years. 3 off seasons ago, he was a hot potential head coaching candidate that never came to fruition, and his last year in Dallas wasn't spectacular. I would say last year with the Chargers was also not spectacular. So he takes on a somewhat flagging Eagles offense. Are you feeling good about this hire?
I still kind of believe in Kellen Moore, so I'm going to say that I do believe in it. I think the main thing for him is going to be he is now getting back to something of what he had with the Cowboys, and let's hope. We don't know what's going to happen with Jason Kelce. Rumors that he may retire, maybe he'll come back, but Philadelphia is still one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. So it's coming back in with a great offensive line. I think a good quarterback in Jalen Hurts. I know he did not play well toward the end of the season. There was a lot of discussions about whether or not he deserved to be paid the contract he was. Was he really this good of a quarterback? I still believe he is. And two great weapons in A.J. Brown and three. And Dallas Goedert. Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert. I almost forgot about Dallas
A.J.
Goedert.
Brown's going to be an interesting one, though, because he was seemingly sort of checked out to the point that he didn't even show up for their playoff game. DeAndre Swift, I think, is a free agent too.
Yeah,
so
Swift will be
able to bring him.
It'll be interesting to see what they do in the running game. I think Brown will be back. I mean, the Eagles clearly were having some issues toward the end of the year. I mean, they were a team that I think many, and myself included, thought were the Super Bowl favorites this year. And for them to kind of collapse toward the end of the season the way that they did is not necessarily surprising, and players being checked out. But him and Jalen Hurts are best friends off the field. I think they'll be able to, throughout the offseason, get it taken care of.
It's interesting that the two big playoff wins for Baker Mayfield, the first one coming a Steelers team that started out like 12-0 and kind of faded a little bit at the end of the season. We wondered if they were really as good as they were and got blown out in their first playoff game. And an Eagles team that I believe was 11-1 and sort of faded down the stretch. And we had wondered whether they were as good as their record earlier and just got kind of bumped on a Monday Night Football game. So.
Baker almost beat those Detroit Lions as well. Almost. He didn't, but he almost beat those Detroit Lions.
I don't know. I don't think it was his fault that they didn't.
Totally no, it wasn't. It wasn't. I mean,
it was good.
It was his interception on the last drive was bad, but I don't know that it was his fault that they didn't win. But yeah, I mean, I do think it's a good move. I think Nick Sirianni had to do something to try and get this offense revived, switch things up. We'll see. I mean, I still think this Eagles team is extremely good. We'll see who they do and don't bring back. Like I said, Jason Kelce also, I think much bigger than DeAndre Swift with if he does or doesn't retire. I know I listened to the podcast and he said he has not officially said anything. He said he never wants to make a decision after a loss like that because you're too emotional. So
it would be surprising if you did it on the field. Now, if you had pre-announced like Teddy Bridgewater, basically said in the middle of the year, this is it for me, guys. I'm hanging it up. Do you think that they're going to end up banning the tush push this offseason?
That's all the rumors. I mean, we'll see.
They lost Kelce and they got the tush push banned. That does fundamentally change some of the things that were spectacular for the Eagles in this run.
Yeah, but I think they'll I still think Hurts, that offense are going to be fine, even with Kellen Moore. Like, I think they'll figure it out. But yeah, I mean, losing that is kind of been when you've got a quarterback who, what does he squat, like 600 pounds? Like, it's a hard play to stop. Although, what was it? The Buccaneers stopped it multiple times. So maybe
it lost a little bit of its luster toward the end of the season. In other kind of news, we will pour one out for our friend Austin, but Arthur Smith did not stay unemployed long. Who would have had on their bingo card that Arthur Smith got a job before Mike Vrabel or Bill Belichick? But Arthur Smith will now be the offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you know what? He's really good at developing. Oh, wait. He will be walking into almost the same quarterback nightmare that he had in Atlanta, where you have Kenny Pickett, who seem to have slid off. They're talking about their desire to re-sign Mason Rudolph. You figure Trubisky, whose contract is up, is probably gone. But, you have some receivers in Pickens and Deontay Johnson and a tight end in Freiermuth who weren't super pumped about some of their lack of targets down the stretch. Pat Freiermuth was the other tight end taken in the same draft as Kyle Pitts. Arthur Smith spent the first 3 years crushing Kyle Pitts' hopes and dreams. Is he now moving over to crush the hopes and dreams of Pat Freiermuth owners or rosterers?
I mean, I would think so. I saw some Steeler fans are happy about this, some aren't. I mean, the one thing we can say, he was actually a pretty good offensive coordinator for the Titans. Like they actually
he might be good for Najee Harris.
Yeah, I mean, well,
if they get a line.
Let's see. Well, I'm a little worried about Najee too, because as a offensive coordinator, he was very run heavy. As a head coach, he seemed to not want to give, in my opinion, one of the best running backs like I've seen since college football, and Bijan Robinson the ball at all. Like he wanted to pretend the dude was sick half the time. We will see what happens with that. I think it's an interesting hire. I also have seen a lot of people saying it's Matt Canada 2.0, which obviously, as you were just complaining about, was not good for what the at least Steeler players wanted.
Sounds like it won't be good for Mike Tomlin either. Tomlin has never had a losing season, but there are a lot of rumblings and some of the comments from their owner and him sitting in on these processes kind of makes you feel like a little more pressure.
Would be insane because so how long has Tomlin been the head coach of the Steelers?
17 years, I think. 18 years.
Maybe they will, because they just seem to never move on from head coaches for like on a whim. So maybe
Cowher got the first Super Bowl with Roethlisberger.
Yeah. So
which was in the 2000s. So
maybe I don't know. I think it'd be insane to move on from Mike Tomlin. I think he's one of the best coaches in the NFL, but we'll see what happens. I think I'm not going to judge a book by its cover yet. Like I said, I think that Arthur Smith was a very good offensive coordinator for Tennessee. When you look at what he did with Derrick Henry, man, who was the wide receiver that was always really good? Robert Woods.
No, it was in Tennessee. That was
Yeah, no, that's right. That was with the Rams.
Woods.
But I know he went
Yeah,
to Tennessee, but
Buffalo and
dang it,
the Rams.
there was
You're
a
right.
wide
They had
receiver who they always had like someone do pretty good. Those obviously John Smith had a couple of good years with him. Ryan Tannehill, you know, that's why I believed in Desmond Ritter so much. Ryan Tannehill, he wasn't there at Tennessee long. I know it was only 2 years, but the 2 years that he was the offensive coordinator, Ryan Tannehill was a top 10 QB. I think he was QB 8 and then QB 5. So like he had a very good offense. I think that this is going to be a good thing overall for Pittsburgh. Now, I don't think Kenny Pickett's a very good quarterback, and we'll see who the one wide receiver will be because they didn't have multiple wide receivers.
Oh, they had A.J. Brown. I forgot. They had A.J. Brown before.
Yeah.
The trade that killed.
Yeah.
I was like, there was somebody.
I know. Yeah, I was sitting there thinking, I was
yes,
like, I know there was a dude who was absolutely said yes. So A.J. Brown. That seems so obvious now once you look it up. That's a bad on our part. But yeah, I think that it's the offense is going to be fine. Again, you have the pieces there. Arthur Smith, you know, let's hope that he can do what he did in Tennessee for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And not what he did for Atlanta, put it that way.
Yeah, no. That was not great. You know, the other wide receiver they had was Corey Davis.
He had that one
since retired. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't bad. I feel like Corey Davis took over from somebody too, if we go further back. But those were the receivers in 2020 and 2021, which would have been Smith's last year. I'm going to pair these next two together. The Buffalo Bills made it official, elevating Joe Brady to be the permanent offensive coordinator. He took over midseason. Meanwhile, their former offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey, has now taken that position with the Cleveland Browns. I'm guessing you think the Brady move is probably a no-brainer based on how they finished, but how are you feeling about Dorsey?
Yeah, I'll start on the positive side, actually, since, you know, I like talking about good things and good news. I do think it's I don't know if it's a smart move, but I think it was a good move to keep Joe Brady. That Bills offense looked good toward the end of the season. I've always thought Joe Brady was a good offensive coach. I mean, he is the architect behind, though I'm sure you can put a lot of this also on Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. But he is the architect behind that LSU offense that up until a couple of years ago was the best offense that we had ever seen in college football. So I think that he knows how to call a game. There was times he was talking about getting a head coaching job. I thought he did a really good job toward the end there. I don't actually even blame the offense. And maybe this is a discussion we can have for Friday, but I saw a lot of people, I don't get on X or Twitter as much anymore, but all the people dragging Josh Allen when he wasn't able to beat Patrick Mahomes. And I hope they keep that same energy for Lamar Jackson, who's actually had just as little success in the playoffs as Josh Allen has had. And I didn't see anybody talking about that. I wouldn't blame the offense for what happened in that playoff game. A lot of that, I think, is Sean McDermott and him just being too safe and everything. So I thought the offense looked really good. I think they need to get, whether it was Stephon Diggs or the way the plays were being called, Stephon Diggs a little bit more involved. That was kind of the big thing I thought that was missing in the game, although he did drop a pretty big pass that probably would have helped his day out a lot in that game. On the Browns side of things, I don't get this at all. Maybe it's just Kevin Stefanski trying to, you know, spread out responsibility a little bit more. I know he had kind of been still calling plays. I believe that, you know, he wasn't technically the offensive coordinator, but kind of was. I mean, Ken Dorsey just had Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen and couldn't get it done and then got fired mid-season. And you're going to bring him in to be the offensive coordinator for right now, Deshaun Watson, and we'll see, because Amari Cooper, I'm pretty sure, is a free agent. May have one more year left on his contract, but I think he might be
one more year.
Okay,
yeah,
I thought maybe he might be. He does have one more year.
I'm looking right now. 2024. He has.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're looking at him then coming in to coach Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper. Maybe because of the offensive line, which I don't think it's unfair to say the Browns' offensive line is better than Buffalo's, and hopefully Nick Chubb will be back and healthy.
In fact, he not only has 2024, it'd be almost $12 million in dead cap for them to cut him.
Yes.
So
hey, that's a good thing. Look, I've always been Amari Cooper's biggest fan.
I mean, he's for as long as he feels like he's been in the NFL, he's only going to be 30.
Oh yeah. He joined the NFL. I think
Yeah.
I'm gonna be wrong when I say this. I want to say he was only like 20, 21. He was very, very young. He was an extremely young wide receiver when he joined the NFL. Yeah, and I mean, I've always been his biggest fan. I've never said a negative thing about Amari Cooper on these shows ever. So it doesn't make sense. I like a lot of the hires that Kevin Stefanski has made, but I don't really get this one. Now, again, maybe that'll change with the Nick Chubb. They didn't really have a running game in Buffalo. Maybe that'll help balance this out. So maybe that's why Ken Dorsey didn't do it as much. I don't want to, I just said I'm not going to judge a book by its cover with Arthur Smith, and he probably failed more miserably than Ken Dorsey did here recently. So I shouldn't judge Ken Dorsey, but I just don't necessarily love it. But I think it's also something Kevin Stefanski had to do because I do think, you mentioned Mike Tomlin might be on the hot seat. I think Kevin Stefanski might be as well, as crazy as that is to say, the fact that he's probably had the most successful coaching tenure in Cleveland Browns history. I think that he's
a finalist for Coach of the Year on next week as NFL Honors. We'll probably make our predictions next Tuesday about who's going to win. But to me, it was either him or DeMeco Ryans.
I think DeMeco Ryans has to get it. You want to beat him in the playoff game. I mean,
it's supposed to be a regular season award.
Still, I'm just saying. No, even then, the Texans won the division though.
Yeah.
And so I'll put it this way. Look, I love Kevin Stefanski. I'd love to see him get the award. If we're being objective, I think DeMeco Ryans has to win it. Not one of us picked Houston to win the division.
11 wins with Joe Flacco and Jerome Ford.
That's why Joe Flacco
fairly impressive. I actually think
get comeback player of the year.
I actually think, no, they seem pretty locked in, and I think it's going to be Damar Hamlin.
It's going to be, and I can't.
I think you're right. I think in the end, DeMeco Ryans we'll get into it more next week. I think Ryans will win, but I think Jim Schwartz might get Coordinator of the Year because
that defense has been amazing.
And they literally, Deshaun Watson played 6 games and wasn't all that great when he was there. Chubb got a game and a half before he blew his knee.
Yeah.
The fact that they were as dominant as they were is
the defense. Yeah.
Well, they got the offense going there.
They did
as much
a
as we want to make fun of the Flackinator.
I wasn't making fun of him. I'm going to buy myself a Joe Flacco jersey if he comes back.
Elijah
Moore
didn't end up too bad. He was wide receiver 54, which is incredibly flex worthy and also a pretty big step up. And then Njoku looked like he got unlocked. Cooper looked good. They have some weapons. Just, I guess my concern would be nothing about Ken Dorsey's tenure in Buffalo would indicate that he knows what to do with a passing offense.
Yeah, I mean that's where I also I think Kevin Stefanski might be in. I don't know that he's going to be fired if 2024 is not a good year for the Browns, but I think he's starting to get on the hot seat because I think this team. So I'll put it this way, and for the life of me, help me out here. His name just jumped out of my head. The owner. Why can't I think of his name?
Oh, for the Browns?
Yeah. Haslam. Jimmy Haslam.
Yeah, Haslam.
If you pay attention to college football at all, you'll know of all the times that he has meddled with Tennessee, and he has not done that recently. And all of a sudden, Tennessee's kind of finding some success. I think Haslam, who's openly talked about how he wants to bring a Super Bowl to Cleveland, is going to mess this up in a way of he wants to see immediate success. And I just don't necessarily blame him based on the Browns roster. I think getting rid of Kevin Stefanski would be a problem. But I do think he is probably feeling a little bit of pressure, and that's why they're making the move. Because, I agree with you. Ken Dorsey makes no sense. Look, you just talked about how that offense looked with Joe Flacco, who they literally brought off the couch a week before the dude started. And I'm going to be honest, I don't even think Dorian Thompson-Robinson was that bad. He had one good game. Then he played bad. I'm sorry, what?
PJ Walker was not good.
Oh, yeah, PJ Walker was horrible. But Dorian Thompson-Robinson, he had a good game, bad game. And then in the other game, I thought he was playing well until he got hurt. Joe Flacco comes in there, and I thought, as you mentioned, played extremely well. I think it goes a lot to, and I tweeted this out, maybe you shouldn't have cut Baker Mayfield and given Deshaun Watson the highest paid quarterback contract in NFL history. But I guess
haven't gotten an incredible return on that investment.
I don't know that I thought Deshaun Watson was going to be this bad, but I'm pretty sure I said cutting Baker Mayfield was going to be a bad idea when that happened. I
do think it's good they're talking about bringing Flacco back to have in the mix because Watson has only mustered 12 games in 2 years. Now, the first year,
I'm aware.
suspensions, but last year, and he didn't look all that great, and he didn't feel like he was all that motivated to get on the field before they shut him down for the
Well,
season.
when you have character questions and then you're paid a fully guaranteed contract, I would probably be taking my time to get back out on the field as well. So, yeah, like I said, I mean, to put a cap on it here, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, they couldn't get that offense going. I don't have much faith that he's going to be able to do it in Cleveland, but we'll see.
Another interesting coordinator hiring. The Bears went out and hired Eric Washington as defensive coordinator. A couple of reasons I find this interesting. They went and pulled him from Buffalo. Buffalo's had a pretty good defense. They've been pretty good. But there is a place where it's, their head coach probably has a lot to do with their defensive success. Chicago, he was a big defensive coordinator. You would think that I believe he was actually calling the defense at the end of this season. So what do you make of this move?
I mean, to Chicago, right? That's what you said?
Yeah, Eric Washington went to Chicago to play for Eberflus.
I don't think the defense is the problem. They've been not great. I think the offense is the honest problem here. So I still think that the Bears are unfortunately a year or two away from really doing anything. We'll see what they do in the draft this year when they've got, 2 of the top 3 picks. Is that correct? So
the actual Bears finished 7-10, so they slid much further back. But they have the number 1 overall pick, thanks to Carolina.
Yeah, good old Carolina Panthers.
I believe the top 3 is Carolina, Washington, New England.
We'll see what they do. I think it could be a good hire for that defense. They have some pieces, but I think if I'm being honest, the issue is probably more Matt Eberflus and then the offense. I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but there are reports that Jim Harbaugh wanted to go to Chicago, and they didn't want to get rid of Matt Eberflus. So I don't know. That'd have been a good idea either. I don't think Jim Harbaugh is. We'll see. I mean, he did take the 49ers.
My guess is he would have kept Justin Fields then.
I would think so, but I think they should keep Justin Fields anyways. But I'm a homer.
Chicago going to Chicago.
Probably.
Well, it'll be interesting. I feel a little bit better about Fields if he ended up going to Atlanta because they have weapons and because Raheem Morris is a little bit of a better head coach, and they'll end up probably getting a nice offensive coordinator.
That'll be a nice homecoming for Fields as well. He's from that area, so it would be nice to see him. Look, I just want to see Justin Fields succeed, and I'll put it this way. And you guys can clip this, do whatever you want with it. On January 30th, 2024, it is 6:26 Central Time. If the Bears trade Justin Fields and draft Caleb Williams, and I won't even put a qualifier on it. I don't care where Justin Fields goes. He's going to be better than Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is not this perfect prospect that everybody's trying to make him out to be. Now, I'm not trying to say he's not good. He is a very good.
Talking about the guy that lost at USC and then cried.
Hey, I've cried after a loss. I'm not gonna shame him for that. It's when you're a very competitive person, I get that part of it. I just think there's a lot of people who don't necessarily watch college football all the time and only tune in to watch certain things, or maybe just kind of go check out some highlights on the YouTube page, and then I see them saying, "Oh, this guy's the next Patrick Mahomes." I can promise you, he's not. There's a lot of things I would qualify not good about Caleb Williams' game, including that hero ball thing that he doesn't necessarily need to do, especially when there's a clean pocket. He's got wide open wide receivers and he decides he wants to run around for 10 minutes behind the line of scrimmage. It's not great. But I do think that Justin Fields has a chance to be extremely successful. I would not get rid of him. You can call me a homer if you want, but it'll be interesting. It's going to be fun. I hope that we do. I'm sure we will. We always do some kind of live coverage here at Campus to Canton. It's going to be fun to talk about when that, especially if Justin Fields gets traded to the Falcons, because that is
especially with Mike, with the Patriots having the number 3 overall pick and Bill not being there, they're less likely to have traded it.
They'll still draft somebody though to piss Mike off, I'm sure.
I'm right there with Caleb Williams. I spent the last 2 Sunday nights crying after the game, and I didn't even play, both after the
It's
Buffalo choked one away and after Detroit, I was crying into my loaded fries. It
Mhm.
was,
At least you had the loaded fries, right? I mean,
I know, to sop up the tears. They were a little soggy, a little
that's
soggy.
all right.
Speaking of Detroit, probably the best news for Lions fans is what came out today. Ben Johnson told both the Commanders and Seahawks he will not be leaving. He's going to remain the offensive coordinator in Detroit. And I'm going to be honest, you may not love this comparison, but I would liken this being a boon to Dan Campbell the same way for Mike McCarthy being able to keep Dan Quinn the last couple of years to
Yeah.
run that defense. It really helped. I love Dan Campbell. I think what he's done with the Lions is incredible. Not losing big pieces of an emerging team in your coordinating staff really helps. We saw what happened to the Eagles this year. I think that loss of Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon hit them a lot harder than maybe we realized it was going to at the time.
No, I love this for Dan Campbell in Detroit. I think if I'm being honest for, I know obviously the game goes longer than 60 minutes. 60 minutes supposed to be 60 minutes of game time. I would say for about 50 minutes of game time, Detroit was the better team on Sunday. Couple decisions that, and like I said, we'll talk more about when we get to the game. I don't get more on that, but I don't think it's unfair to say that Detroit was not expected to be possibly heading to a Super Bowl this year. I think a lot of people picked them to make the playoffs and be a good team. I think most people probably consider them a wild card team, not winning the NFC North, not challenging the 49ers the way that they did in an NFC Championship game. This just puts them one step closer to returning and possibly going to a Super Bowl. So I like that offense has been humming with Jared Goff and Ben Johnson with all of those weapons. Jahmyr Gibbs just looked amazing this year as a rookie. Amon-Ra St. Brown, again, a 4th-round pick.
David Montgomery looked really good, too. He was a perfect fit for what they wanted to do.
I believe he signed a 2-year contract, so they'll have him for another season, 3-year contract. So they've got him for 2 more years, assuming Ben Johnson stays for those 2 years. There's no questions about this team offensively. It's can they get the defense together a little bit more? Yeah. And even then, I don't think the defense was horrible. If they could even take that small step forward on the defense, you're looking at possibly a Super Bowl favorite next year out of the NFC. So I do think it's a massive win for the Lions.
Although I have to say that NFC North is almost like the AFC South. We had low expectations universally coming in, and depending on what happens with a couple things with Minnesota, they could all be a lot friskier than Green Bay actually looks a heck of a lot better than I was expecting. Chicago has a lot of pieces in place. Minnesota, a lot of questions about Cousins and where they go at quarterback, but that, it's like the AFC South. We thought it was going to be a cakewalk for Jacksonville, and instead it's like, oh, you are not in a great division, friends. That'll bring us to the games. We'll start with what was the sadder one for me, which is the AFC Championship game. If you were here on Friday, you know that I was not a fan of either team. Go Broncos. But Kansas City gets the 17-10 victory. They will go to the Super Bowl for the 4th time in 5 years, despite not scoring any points in the second half of that game. They are taking their 12th man, the referees, with them to Las Vegas, so that ought to help. But in all seriousness, 6 straight AFC Championship games, 4 Super Bowls out of the last 5 years. Are the Chiefs, do we have to start talking about them the same way we've in the past referenced the Patriots and teams that have become modern day dynasties?
I think you have to. I don't think I don't think it's fair to Kansas City to not discuss them in those terms. It's honestly you have to have respect for it, but it's let's also be honest. As NFL fans of not the Kansas City Chiefs, can all also admit it's very annoying because Kansas City came in this year as a team that not that we didn't expect them to be good. We did. But watching them toward the end of the year, it's this is not the same old Kansas City Chiefs. They're not going to make the Super Bowl yet. Here we are on January 30th, 2024, talking about them heading to another Super Bowl. I honestly think as long as you have Mahomes and Andy Reid, that's what it's going to be. You're going to be talking about them in the AFC Championship. It's the Patriots, Bill Belichick, and Tom Brady again. It's okay. They're going to be in the AFC Championship. It's who makes it across the field for them, and can they do what Peyton and very few, who was the other team that even knocked the Patriots off? I don't even remember for the life of me now.
Peyton Manning actually fared pretty well.
I know he did it at least 3 times.
He got it at least, yeah. He got. I think the Colts went twice. Didn't they win one, lose one too?
Yes, you're right. Yeah. They
he got
Miami
times.
when they lost.
Yeah, and I know he had beaten them 3 times. Pittsburgh, I think, got through New England.
They won the one in Miami, right? That was the weather one. That was against Chicago. That was
they beat Chicago, but they lost to the Saints.
Yeah.
I think the Saints one was in Florida too. Oh no, yeah, because it wasn't in the Superdome. No. I think they beat Chicago in the Superdome.
Now I'm almost positive that was a rain game because that. Now I'm gonna go crazy.
Yeah, you're right. I think it did rain, and wasn't it
like what's his name?
It was the old Florida quarterback for Chicago too. This is.
Oh, I know this
Alzheimer's
is
so coming up.
Yeah, because didn't they still had, in my opinion, should be in the Hall of Fame, and now I can't remember his name, which probably doesn't. But they had the kick returner. The Bears did. I'm almost positive like
Devin Hester.
Kickback. Devin Hester. If I'm remembering correctly, I think didn't he like almost take a kickback or took a kickback, and it was like all the points that Chicago scored in that game. It was not a pretty Super Bowl.
No, but those kind of things happen. But yeah, there weren't that many teams that were, or people that were able to get past. And I would actually say Patrick Mahomes, from his standpoint, while he's never fared well against Brady, he lost the AFC Championship game to Brady, lost the Super Bowl to Brady when he was with Tampa Bay. There aren't really any other big AFC quarterbacks who have been able to take him out.
I mean, it's crazy because I feel like, so mentioning this player, I think Josh Allen could be that. I think he could be the Peyton Manning. They would always get them in the regular season. It was when they got to the playoffs that they would end up losing to the Patriots. Josh Allen they've been able to beat the Chiefs in the regular season. They just can't get over that hump in the playoffs. And I know we talked a little bit about it last week. Like, I think some of that might be you just need to change your head coach. You just need to change something to get things changed up a little bit more there. I do think Josh Allen can be that, but yeah, I think it would be unfair to not talk about the Kansas City Chiefs as a dynasty because I think it's, do you agree with the statement of, like I said, as long as Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are there, they're probably going to at least go to a couple more, at least AFC Championship games. Even if they don't make it to another Super Bowl after this, if they continually make it to AFC Championship games, you have to consider them a dynasty.
Yeah. So we were both correct. Both of the Colts Super Bowls with Manning were in Miami.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
They were both in Miami because they're a couple of years apart. Both the one that they lost to the Saints and the one that they beat Chicago were both in Miami. Because I was trying to think, I'm like, I know the one that they lost was in Miami.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
I was looking it up. But yeah, I mean, as much as it hurts me, they've been destroying the AFC West for a long time too. I think it's either 9 or 10. They took over as soon as the Broncos had a string of dominance that started with Tebow, and then the 5 seasons for Peyton Manning, they won all those, and then Kansas City took over after that, and they haven't let it go since. So it's got to be 9 because that's how many years Manning's been gone. And I mean, Denver hadn't even beaten the Chiefs since Manning left until the one that they got this year. On the flip side for the Ravens, you referenced it a little bit earlier. I think there is a lot of talk now about Lamar, and it did seem like, he bet on himself last offseason, kind of sold into a vision. He really carried that team a lot of times during the regular season, but yet another big game on the line where he just doesn't get it done. And I think that's been the question. Can they ever get to the Super Bowl with him, especially looking at, you got young up-and-comers like CJ Stroud. You've got Patrick Mahomes still there. Josh Allen is still there. Teams are constantly working to improve. How are you feeling about Lamar?
I mean, I still think Lamar is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, but it's not unfair to question, like I said, if people are going to question Josh Allen in the NFL playoffs, at least he's won multiple playoff games. Now, he's not been able to get to the Super Bowl, but Lamar Jackson hasn't. I think Lamar Jackson has 2 playoff wins, if I'm remembering off the top of my head, because I know he lost.
Yeah, and the last time they were a number 1 seed, they lost a tough game at home too. They got shelled by Tennessee when they were 14-2 or something like that.
I don't know that all of this was on him. This game, I think some of that was definitely on. And again, you don't want to make excuses for teams because everybody's dealing with injuries. The Chiefs just lost their defensive end going into the Super Bowl. Like, everybody has injuries at this point in time of the year. But obviously the Ravens were down multiple running backs, and they were not running the ball a ton, even though, like, Gus Edwards and them were doing damage against that Kansas City defense running the ball, and they kept going away from it, which I don't get at all. But I don't know that I'm putting a ton of that on Lamar. I'll say the same thing about Lamar as I will Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills last week. Like, sometimes, like, you just need that one bit of luck that gets you that win, and then it just starts to trickle downhill for you. Like, that's really what kind of happened for Peyton Manning toward the end. Like, he finally got over that hump, and then it seemed like every time they were playing in the playoffs, he was getting that win against Tom Brady and the Patriots and continuing and moving on and getting that chance for a Super Bowl. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson haven't gotten that chance yet, whether it was because of them or something else on the team. But I think once that happens, I think it just becomes like a lot of sports players are superstitious. I think it becomes kind of like Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are the boogeyman right now. They really are. Like, they look at it, this guy just can't be beat. We can't get past him. But then once you see what's the line from I'm almost positive it's one of the Rocky movies. I don't know why I said movers. Where he's bleeding and he's like, I don't know. Now I'm just gonna butcher this.
Cut me.
No. Is it like the Russian dude starts bleeding? He's like, look, he bleeds. He's human or something like that. I don't remember how the thing goes. Whatever. Like, you just need Kansas City to falter one time, one of these guys to get past them, to them to believe they can actually do it. I think it's getting harder for Baltimore because, I mean, you mentioned C.J. Stroud. You got Josh Allen.
To answer your question, Lamar, 2-4 career playoff record. He was 0-1 in 18, 0-1 in 19, went 1-1 in 2020. They won their first game and got knocked out, and hasn't been back until this year where they also went 1-1.
I mean, Josh Allen's 5 for 5. So, I mean, not that that's much better, but
making the playoffs?
No, 5 wins, 5 losses in the playoffs.
Oh, yeah. Well, because they always seemingly win their first game and then just gut their fans, like in usually it's the divisional round.
Well, let's see.
Yeah, which was the same this year, divisional round.
Okay, so hang on. I want to ask you a question. So they've got 5 losses.
By the way,
you know how many times
what helped
to Kansas City?
You know what helped? Well, he's lost at least 4 times to Kansas City.
3.
Okay, 3. Yeah.
So you the other one made. So the only one that doesn't, which his
they
very
lost
first
to Joe
playoff
Burrow.
game, that was the other main one. That one made sense.
Well, and that's the one we're forgetting in Lamar's own division. He was kind of fortunate in that this year Burrow started out injured, never looked good, and then
Deshaun Watson gone all season.
But you mentioned things turned around for Peyton Manning. It could be because, as great as Tom Brady is, there was one team that he couldn't beat in the playoffs. And that was a team that ended up picking up Manning. The Broncos handed Tom Brady his first ever playoff loss back when he was playing Jake Plummer.
Oh, yeah.
For Denver. He's 1-3 in his career. So maybe Lamar needs to change. What team can't Patrick Mahomes beat? We're going to have to start looking at his records.
So the only other team that actually I want to see this. He's only lost in the wild card 1 time. Josh Allen.
And this reminds me, that's the only quarterback in the AFC that has had both regular and playoff success against Patrick Mahomes is Joe Burrow.
Yeah. So do you know who the wild card team that they lost to is?
It was his first year, right?
It was. Is that Houston game? It was that crazy Houston
game. That's right. Weren't they up too?
They were. And
they were up.
Watson brought him back.
Didn't they fire that was pre-Sean McDermott, right? was that?
I think so. I think that's I want to say that's when they had.
I feel like their coach hammered them.
Oh God, what is his name? This has been a great show of us not remembering who we need to remember. But yes, I'm almost
Oh
positive
no,
you are
Sean
correct.
McDermott
Was he?
their
Was that his
coach.
first year that he took over?
Must have been. So let me look at because it said he was hired on January 11th, 2017.
Yep.
And
2019 was that first year. They were 10-6.
Well,
Interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think
at least they got to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Denver hasn't been to the playoffs in any of these time periods. So it's going to be interesting. The pressure is only going to get more intense, I think, on Lamar Jackson, because now he kind of, it was intense a little bit on him trying to prove himself to get a contract. But now that he has that big contract, I don't know about you, but I think he's very likely to be named NFL MVP next week. And this would be the second time that he was MVP and his team was the number 1 seed and they lost at home in the playoffs. And I know that happens to teams, but it's going to, the AFC has a big group of competitive quarterbacks and several of them can't get over the Patrick Mahomes hump. The one that has is Joe Burrow, which is also unfortunately in Lamar's division. I like John Harbaugh as a coach, but it's been over a decade since they went to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
That was following the 2012 regular season. It's been a while, and I get what you're saying too about Mike Tomlin, but I think the pressure on him is it's been well over a decade since they won a Super Bowl, and it's been a while since they actually did anything in the playoffs. And I think some of these teams, it's some of the questions that we're starting to have about Sean McDermott too. Is there a level at which, even though you have a really great coach, they can only get you to a certain point and can't get you past that? Or is it just that as long as Kansas City has Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, nobody's really getting past that, and it's just blocked? I mean, you got to wonder how many coaches and quarterbacks kind of suffered that same fate earlier in the AFC with Tom Brady and the combination of Brady and Manning.
Yeah, I mean, I know, and we talked a little bit about this last week. I do think Sean McDermott's a great coach. I just think the biggest thing for him is he just plays it too safe, and you can't do that against Patrick Mahomes. You just can't. And it happened too with I don't remember if Green Bay's I want to say Green Bay's the team I'm thinking of, but you can't drive down the field like that in a game where you have a chance to win it and then just put it all on your field goal kicker, especially in the Buffalo Kansas City game with the wind the way that it was and a quarterback like Josh Allen. I get if you can't get there, but that play calling toward the end of the game in that last drive was just so safe because they're like, oh, well, all we need is a field goal and we'll go in overtime. That's not guaranteed. You have to play to win the game. I'm not telling you to go for it on 4th and 10. I mean, Dan Campbell's going on 4th and 3 in an NFC championship game to win games. That's the kind of coach you need if you want. You have to make those calls. And yes, you have to be successful. And Dan Campbell wasn't, which we'll talk about in a little bit. You have to be able to make those calls to get to these Super Bowls. And Sean McDermott just doesn't do it. And I think that's what's really holding the Bills back.
Well, that is a perfect segue. We'll transition to the NFC Championship game where the Lions had a 24-7 lead at halftime. Looked like everything was breaking their way, and as quickly as they got up, I mean, there were 4 minutes left in the third quarter, and we were back tied 24 and just kind of fade away in a 34-31 49ers victory. So you mentioned it, Dan Campbell, who he is and who he's been for 3 years, has been the guy that goes for it.
Yeah.
It's worked for him in a lot of places, both in the regular season and earlier in the playoffs. I think it even worked, some of their daring calls in the first half, but 2 big 4th downs, where apparently Josh Reynolds was channeling his inner Marquez Valdez-Scantling and forgot he had hands. Don't break their way. There's been a lot of back and forth and criticism, and I get it. I probably on the second one would have kicked the field goal to tie, but that isn't who he's been. What do you make of those decisions?
I'll say that I hate it for Detroit fans and players because all you have now is to look at. You threw away 6 points that probably wins. You're going to the Super Bowl. We're talking about you going to the Super Bowl right now. But I can't blame Dan Campbell for doing it because, as you said, it's what he's done all year. It wasn't a dereliction of character. He didn't break away from what he usually does. That was him. And if we are sitting here today talking about, oh my God, look at those two great plays, great play calls on fourth down. Let's be honest. It's not like either one of those play calls were bad either. Like Josh Reynolds dropped the ball. He was wide open.
That first fourth down, they converted it.
Exactly. Like
put it on the ground.
So if they convert them, we're having a completely different conversation. The big thing, the stupid thing for me was running it on third down with David Montgomery. Like that was if you really want to question something, that's what you question.
Where it forced him to use a timeout.
Yeah. I don't question the fourth down plays because, as you mentioned, that's what he's done all season long. And if he succeeds, it's kind of like what we've talked about a lot. I think we talked a little bit. I think it was Mike Tomlin possibly in the playoffs last year did the same thing and they didn't succeed. Everybody does that. They do the Monday morning quarterback thing where it's if a coach doesn't succeed in making those decisions, we criticize them. But if they do, we laud them and say how great and how ballsy that is. So I'm not going to criticize them for it. Does it suck? Yes, because I also don't disagree with Dan Campbell, I believe, said to Kyle Shanahan was like, that may have been our only shot. He's not wrong. How many times have we seen these teams get this close and never have a chance to make it back to a Super Bowl again? I mean, he's literally possibly, and again, possibly, because we just talked about Buffalo Bills missing a kick. We just talked about the Green Bay Packers missing a kick to tie games up. We don't know that the field goal kicker was Badgley, right? We don't know that he makes both those field goals. He might miss both of them. And then we're sitting here saying, Dan Campbell, you've gone for it on fourth down all year. Why are you kicking field goals here? So I think it's really a lose-lose situation for him unless he completes the fourth downs. It does suck because, like I said, I was with you. I wasn't texting you and Dennis, but I was with you guys on hoping the Lions won that game. And it feels like because of them not converting on those 2 fourth downs, that's why they lost the game. But it's other parts in the game and why they lost that. It sucks. I hope they have a chance to get back to it. I honestly feel more bad for the Detroit Lions players because, I think those guys are looking at it as the old NFL saying is don't ever leave points on the board, right? And they did that technically in both those instances, and they could be realistically on their way to a Super Bowl right now.
The team that is on the way to the Super Bowl is the 49ers. And, we've there's been a lot of debate about Brock Purdy and how good he is and what he would do. And I have to be honest, I was pretty impressed with the way he played when they came out in that second half down 24-7. And, as I've mentioned in some of our C2C Slack chats before the last 2 weeks, I don't know that you can blame Brock Purdy because as far as I know, he's not playing defense. And that was certainly a big part of the 49ers issues, both against the Packers and against the Lions, where they got down and teams were able to move the ball. But Purdy ends up 267 yards, a TD and an interception, had that interception in the first half, runs for 48 yards on 5 carries. At one point, I think he was over 50. He lost a little bit on a kneel down or a play like that. There were some pretty clutch plays and some pretty clutch throws to help bring this team back. What have you thought of Brock Purdy?
I mean, I don't think you can question him at all, to be honest with you. And I was someone who did not think that he was going to be able to continue to succeed this way. I'm actually pretty sure I talked at the beginning of this year that I think there was a chance Trey Lance was going to beat him out in the quarterback competition. That didn't happen. He's been phenomenal. I think he's the quarterback of the 49ers future. And I don't even want to, I feel like it's almost kind of degrading to him to say this because of Kyle Shanahan, because I've seen that kind of stuff as well. Kyle Shanahan is, look, I'm not going to, don't give Kyle Shanahan his roses because he's a great offensive play caller. But you have to give it to Brock Purdy. I mean, he finishes his quarterback 6 in fantasy scoring this year, guys. It's not a fluke anymore. It's just not. It's just what he was doing at the end of last year, he's doing it again. I think he deserves to be talked. It's insane to say this because he was Mr. Irrelevant, right? Like
Yeah.
he's in essence
Very
kind
last
of
pick.
Tom Brady all over again. It's like, and all of a sudden it's like, it's crazy to say this, but I don't think it's unfair to talk about him as at least a top 12 quarterback in dynasty fantasy football. And when you talk about it from an NFL perspective, you're right. Like, I think if he wouldn't have led the comeback, I still think it'd have been unfair to criticize Brock Purdy because I thought he played well even earlier in that game. But what he was able to do, because it was a lot of him in that second half, especially that big run on third down.
He had a couple of just ginormous runs, and he's not known as a runner.
Oh, I know. So, like, I don't know what you say about him. Okay, fine. He's not as athletic as Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. He doesn't have a cannon like any of those guys either. He may not be as efficient as Tua is in Mike McDaniel's offense, but like he may not have the strong arm like Justin Herbert or the size of like. But what else can you criticize him for? Because the dude just goes out there and wins. And again, he was QB6 in fantasy football this year. QB6, not QB 66, not QB 26, QB6.
I mean, it's been impressive, and I don't know about you, but I'm hoping it'll be Brock Purdy Super Bowl winner here in a couple of weeks. But
as much as I don't want to hear certain people who will fairly get to crow about how they said Brock Purdy was going to be the guy, and your boy might have been, like I said, on Trey Lance. I don't want to see Patrick Mahomes Kansas City put it again. So yes, I will be rooting for the 49ers.
I like to think of it as me following through on my Broncos fandom and rooting for Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, and Christian McCaffrey. You know, the seeds of the great Denver Broncos, Mike Shanahan and McCaffrey's children. And of course, Lynch was our strong safety for a couple of years. So,
well, I mean, what about should I be rooting? Since I've met Patrick Mahomes, he's a very nice man. Maybe I should be rooting for Patrick. I don't know.
You know, for each of us, we have to decide our own
No,
path.
I'm going with the 49ers.
Yeah.
CMC, baby. I want to see CMC win a Super Bowl.
It will be fun. We will talk more about the Super Bowl next Friday. If you remember, there is a gap week between now and the Super Bowl. The Pro Bowl is this weekend. We will not be doing a Pro Bowl preview. Probably won't be doing a Pro Bowl recap. But on Friday, Matt and I will be back. We will be looking at some running backs and some pass catchers who we think you might want to cut the cord on this off season. And then early part of next week, we will probably make our NFL honors predictions. And there was something else I'm sure I'll come up with before then.
Yeah,
but then the Friday before the Super Bowl, we will preview the game and we will do our prop bets. I always have a lot of fun with that. Look up some props so you can look forward to that. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Feel free to download, give us a rate and a review. That'll just make Dennis's vacation even brighter and help him to get over the loss of the Lions and coming to grips with Bill O'Brien being at Ohio State. If you were here on Friday, you heard him say that was the sacrifice he made to get the Lions to the Super Bowl. So I'm sure he's not as happy about that today. I told him he needed to rewind and listen to your optimism.
It won't be too bad. We'll see.
It won't be too bad.
At least I don't think so.
Well, you guys have a wonderful week, and we will see you on Friday.